Hello and welcome to the brand new Pangolin Podcast. I'm your host, Toby German. Thank you very much for joining me. In each episode, I've invited a professional wildlife photographer to imagine themselves in a remote location. And along with their camera gear and supplies, they're allowed to bring 5 carefully selected photographs to hang on the wall of their humble dwelling. 4 of these must be their own images, and the final one must be one they admire by another photographer. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see the images as we talk, but for audio listeners on other platforms, there's a link in the description to a gallery. We hope you enjoy it. On today's show,
when you're crawling on your belly using your elbows, crawling through walrus poo, and trying not to get it on your camera to get that shot, it reminds you that it's not always that pretty.
my guest today is one of Canada's top wildlife photographers and one of the most engaging and compelling creators on YouTube today, with nearly 700,000 subscribers and growing fast. It is, of course, Mr. Simon D'Entremont from Nova Scotia. I'm sure that he's a familiar face to most of you, but what you probably don't know is that pro wildlife photographer is actually Simon's 3rd career. He started out as a stockbroker and then worked as a civil servant for the government of Nova Scotia for 10 years, holding 3 senior deputy ministerial positions. I first noticed Simon's meteoric rise in the world of wildlife photography when his subscriber count was a fraction of what it is today, and I reached out to him to invite him to come to Botswana, which he duly did. And since then, we have hosted several of his photographic tours around Africa and hopefully many, many more in the future. And so with that, I am delighted to be able to welcome Simon as the first guest of our new Pangolin podcast series. So without further ado, let's meet the pro. Hello, Simon.
Hey, Toby. Thanks so much. And such a gracious introduction. Thank you so much.
Well, I had to go big for the first one, didn't I?
That's right. I have a former boss who used to tell me after people would say nice things to him, he'd come into my office and say, Simon, you fooled another one. So there you go.
Well, you can add me to that list then of all the people you fooled.
There you go.
Simon, thank you very much for joining me on the first Pangolin podcast. Now, I've asked you to choose 5 images to share with us. And for each of these images, we're going to talk a little bit about how you took them, why they mean so much to you. And at the same time, I hope that the conversation will meander around and talk about all sorts of things to do with your blossoming wildlife photography career.
Looking forward to it. It's going to be great.
So the first image you've chosen is a stunning landscape. Now, you're better known as a wildlife photographer. So tell me, why did you choose a landscape as your first image?
When it comes to your theme of being stranded on a deserted island or somewhere and bringing some photos with you, you tend to focus maybe less on the prettier photos and more on the more meaningful ones. So this is an image of Peggy's Cove Lighthouse at sunset, and the sun is setting behind the lighthouse, creating a beautiful red sky with some cloud above, and there's a small sliver above the horizon from which the sun is peeking out at the intersection of the horizon and the edge of the lighthouse, creating a beautiful sun star with those spikes all around. And Peggy's Cove, the lighthouse, and this photo is actually the most popular tourism destination in Nova Scotia where I live. It's a place that everyone goes and everyone knows, and it's actually on my wall, right up above me, right here. And this was part of my journey, actually, for becoming a wildlife photographer. I shot wildlife for years, and I got stuck into a rut, I would call it, where everything was a boas, bird on a stick. You know, you get a bird on a stick, and you take that photo, and the next week you see the same bird, you take it again, and it's on a similar looking stick, and it's 2 versions of the same photo. So I did that for a couple of years, and I said, I've got to break out of shooting a bird on a stick. I need to implement more creative photography techniques into my wildlife photography. So where could I learn that? And I thought, well, landscape photographers are good at understanding colors and shapes and light and so on. So I dabbled into landscape photography as a way of building my skill set to take better wildlife photos. And then when I went back to taking wildlife photos, I would bring some of those skills with me. And of course, if you're going to be on a deserted island for a while, you want reminders of home. So this is a famous landmark where I live. And the shot, actually, I saw the sun coming down. There was a cloud cover all the way, except there was a little slice of clear sky right on the horizon. And I knew when the sun would pass through that, it would pass through this little slit. I positioned myself to where I thought the sun would come out at the intersection of the lighthouse and the horizon. And I waited for the sun to come down. And when it did, I only had to move about 10 inches left. And
Right.
the technique to get the sun star is a small aperture. So I shot this, I think, at f13, 16, something like that. You really close the aperture down and you partially block the sun. And those are the two things that create that sun star. You need a super small aperture because it's the aperture blades reflections that actually create the spikes. And you need to partially block the sun with a rock, a tree, the side of an elephant. They can all work.
I was going to say, I mean, this is an amazing wildlife skill, isn't it? Especially when it comes to that golden hour where you want to try and capture something and you're shooting straight into the sun. What a great way to practice.
Yeah. So put that, if there's an elephant or a giraffe on the horizon and the sun is coming up, put the sun right on their edge and make your aperture very small.
Was this a shot you had in mind that you wanted to get one day? And was this
Not
the result of many, many attempts?
I had just happened to go there when I thought there might be some interesting light, and I've
Okay.
been there more than once. But what's interesting, the shot itself, I exposure bracketed it with 3 shots, and
Okay.
this is just the dark exposure. And that's
Oh.
it. So it's not, and there's no fancy processing. It came out this way.
Brilliant. Okay, excellent. I'm glad you've already got it on your wall. You've already got the frame. You can take that one with you.
Thanks so much.
Simon, during the introduction, I obviously mentioned that you had a decade-long career in the civil service in Nova Scotia. Do you find that some of the skills that you learned from being so in the public, having to engage with people, try to get your ideas across, has that helped you going forwards in your new wildlife photography tutorials and leading tours?
Sure, certainly I learned a lot of skills. I was responsible for managing departments with hundreds of people and hundreds of $1 million budgets. And when you're at that senior level, you end up dabbling in a little bit of everything. You have got to understand the financial side. You got to understand the communication side. You do end up doing public speaking events, which I think helped me as well. And in my early days in the public service, you write briefing notes and you learn how to structure things for people to understand and to be brief. In 2 pages, you have to explain a complex issue to someone, how it works, what your options for your decisions are, and which option you should choose. And one smart trick that you use in briefing notes that works in YouTube videos as well is you explain things in the way at the beginning so that at the end, when you make a recommendation, it makes a lot more sense. Because at the beginning, you explain how things work, and at the end, you say, of course, that would be what you should do. So I do a little bit of that as well. I've always been a little bit of a science nerd. I enjoy reading about quantum mechanics and astrophysics and these types of things. That comes out a bit in some of my videos in my teaching style. And I'm a visual person. I like to see visuals of how things move and how things work. And I put some of that in my videos as well. And people seem to really enjoy them.
No, I mean, your videos are incredibly engaging and compelling, like I said. If there was somebody wanting to start a YouTube channel, what would be the one nugget of advice you would give to somebody wanting to get into this game?
Being able to just present ideas effectively, I think, is a good skill. And it's good to have some proficiency at something if you're starting a YouTube channel. It's hard to break into an area where if I was doing cell phone reviews, how many of those are out there? And I don't have any particular skill to stand out. Whereas in my photography, when I do photography videos, at the beginning, I do a little bit of introduction and I splash some of my photos. And it's like a competency test that I pass at the beginning of my video that people will say, well, he takes pretty good photos. He must know something of what he's talking about. And then I back it up with hopefully good education and entertaining delivery.
Great. I mean, it's been a fantastic journey for us. I mean, the photo hosts on our channel were very the same. They were absolutely terrified of starting, but now they're into it. And they've become really adept at it, but it's daunting. It's really daunting when you start.
And developing a presence of their own online, which I'm really enjoying to see as well.
Yeah, it's excellent. Now, you mentioned astrophotography. I think that brings us on to our next image. Do you want to tell us about this one?
This photo is a silhouette of an oak tree with a Milky Way coming up behind it. And it's a famous tree in Nova Scotia. I chose it both because it is a famous landmark, but also it's gone. This tree was knocked down by a hurricane, and this oak tree was the most famous tree in the province of Nova Scotia where I live. It was right by the highway, about an hour before you reach Halifax, our main city. So this was the homecoming tree. When you're coming from outside the province, other parts of Canada, and you're driving to Halifax, our biggest city, you drive past this tree, and this was everyone's favorite tree. And I got this beautiful shot of it, of the Milky Way behind it. The bright parts behind the tree are actually light pollution from the city of Halifax and the airport, which worked out perfectly to create a beautiful glow. So I picked it because it's home. It's also not there anymore, and it's my best-selling print of all time. Actually, when the hurricane knocked down the tree, someone reposted my photo to social media and said, "Hey, Simon d'Entremont's got a great photo of that tree." And I sold 60 prints of it in the next week.
Wow.
And astrophotography is my roots, and that's one of the other reasons I chose it. My first ever photo was of the Milky Way with a film camera. And that's how I started into photography, is trying to find a way to attach a camera to my telescope to take photos of the moon and galaxies. And wildlife photography came after. And I've always had a little bit of a science bent to me. You know, if I would have had another career other than the one I had, I probably would have been an astrophysicist.
Tell us a little bit about the technical challenges of this shot. You've got a lot of light sources, you're playing with dark, you're trying to create a silhouette. What were the real challenges in taking this photograph?
So number one, I created the image by taking about a dozen shots of the Milky Way sky, and you have to shoot very short exposures because the Milky Way moves and it'll streak if you take exposures longer than, let's say, 15 seconds or so. There's a formula, actually. 500 divided by your focal length is how many seconds you can take an exposure before the stars will streak. So I'm taking 15-second exposures, and because it's such a short exposure time, you have to crank up your ISO to like 3200 and even 6400, and the images get a bit noisy. So what you can do is shoot a dozen images and stack them in software to clean up the noise. So that's what I did there. Then for the land part of the shot, what I did is I took one long, slow exposure at a lower ISO, maybe 2 or 3 minutes, because the land will still be totally black if I just try to use a 13-second exposure that I use for the sky, and then I put the two together in Photoshop. One of the biggest challenges is I'm right next to a highway, and it was at 2 a.m., and you'd be surprised how many big trucks carrying cargo are still traveling at 2 a.m. So every 2 minutes or every minute, there was a truck going by. So for me to try to take that long exposure of the land with no trucks in it, I had to take several ruined exposures of that with big trucks passing by and lighting up the scene, including the tree. Because when they come around a corner by the highway, their headlights are pointed right at that big tree. So it would light up like a circus, you know.
You must have just heard them coming in the distance and thought
Oh
to yourself, come on, please, please.
100%. And then the processing had to tame as well a bit of the light pollution that's in the background because there's an airport there. Of course, that's the trick in processing, including in wildlife photo processing. I try to embrace the imperfections these days. You know, there used to be that when a branch was in front of the face of my fox, I used to try to clone it out. Now, it's part of the environment.
So as with most images like this, most people would be looking at it and saying, you know, apart from the odd truck coming past, this must have been just a lovely evening out. But I think you can attest to the fact that it's never easy, is it?
No, people think that wildlife photography is a glamorous living or hobby because the photos are so pretty. But I was once asked, what would I call a book on photography if I wrote one? And I answered that it would be called Mostly Lying in the Mud, because that's what it actually is. When you're in Svalbard and there are some walruses and you're trying to get close and a nice low angle and you're crawling on your belly using your elbows, crawling through walrus poo, and trying not to get it on your camera to get that shot, it reminds you that it's not always that pretty. But that's, you know, I enjoy the field craft part of photography as well. And I enjoy, you know, sneaking up on animals and without disturbing them and so on. That's part of the adventure. But my other tip as well is that my number one wildlife photography tip is don't wear your good clothes, because, getting innovative angles and so on is a big part of good wildlife photos that are going to stand out. And that means getting down low. I've climbed trees to get eye level shots of owls, and I've scrounged in the mud to get low angle on ducks. And so don't bring your good clothes is one of my top tips.
That's a top tip. And I think lying down in the mud is generous as the term mud goes. I think more often than not, it might not be mud.
Yeah, that's right. I have a towel permanently in my vehicle to put on my seats before I sit down in it, because you never know what I've sat in.
Well, that in itself leads me to another question. Is there something that you take other than your towel that you would always remember to pack?
I like be able to do a grab and go situation. So I like grabbing my camera and a 600 millimeter lens, maybe a 1.4 teleconverter on it, 2 batteries and 2 memory cards. Now, when I go on an expedition, go to Africa, go to Yellowstone or whatever, of course, you're packing a big bag. You've got lots of accessories, but I actually like a fairly nimble setup. But of course, when you go to Africa, you got to have a second lens as well. Can't just have a big 600. Things are up close, so it's nice to have a shorter lens or a zoom or something like that. But I like a pretty nimble approach. For landscape photography, bringing a few filters along, like a neutral density and a circular polarizer, are pretty handy.
And what would you say on a more extended trip like an expedition? What are your next lenses? You got your 600 prime.
Yeah, 600 prime, but I'm probably going to end up getting a 400 one of these days, because in Africa, 600 is almost a bit long. But I shoot lots of little birds around here in Nova Scotia, so you need some focal length for that. But I really love the look of the 70 to 200. And my photographic ambition actually is to include more environment in my photos. And when you've got longer lenses like 100 to 400, you're still taking portraits, and I'm trying to shoot wider. So my photographic ambition is to include more environment and shoot wider. So even though I need a 100 to 400, I bring a 70 to 200 to force me to include more, because you have to put more environment because you don't have as much magnification. And it forces you to look around the scene and to include other things to put in photos. Because to be honest, taking tight portraits with fast lenses is almost a crutch. And I'm guilty of that, of not being good enough to find an environmental shot that tells more story. And that leads to my other piece of advice. Good wildlife photos should be about things, not of things. I've got a photo of a leopard up tight, which is great. But if I back up a little bit, it's a leopard standing next to a river, and he's trying to figure out whether or not he wants to jump the river. So shooting a bit wide, getting a bit more story in the photo is a good photographic skill to develop.
Talking of Africa and talking about the stories of Africa, is that your next trip? Is Africa? Have you got something in between? What have you got planned for this year?
It is. I did Yellowstone last month, which was fantastic. Bison in the snow and some wolves. I got really lucky. I showed up my first time there, and my first sighting was 15 wolves on 3 bison kills. And the first, and I've got people who had been there for 20 years and said they'd never had a sighting that good. That was my first 15 minutes riding in the snow coach. So that was fantastic. My next trips are to Botswana, where I'm going to go visit your team. And we'll be on the Toby River, which of course is really become one of my favorites. It's a great problem that I tell my guests, which they don't believe me, that by day 3, we'll say, elephants? Yeah, okay, I've seen enough of those. Because you see so many. You wait for the, dust bathing elephant in front of the sunset. We'll stop for that. And that's where you pull out the 70 to 200, get a nice wide shot. And then I've got the British Columbia for grizzly bears in the month of August here in Canada. And then Kenya, September and October, where I'm leading some tours as well.
So I think now we will move on to the next image, which is a blackbird. What's happening here?
It's a red-winged blackbird with the breath of the bird coming out of its mouth, backlit against a dark background with a beautiful golden glow all around it. And the reason I chose this photo was a few different reasons. Number one, it proves that if you put your mind to it, you can actually plan out a shot. This was actually an intentional photo, not a fluke. I planned out the conditions, and I actually made my first YouTube video about taking this photo. So this is the start of my YouTube career. So that's one of the reasons that I chose it. And also, A red-winged blackbird is actually one of the top 2 or 3 most common species in North America. There's probably 400 million of them in North America, and yet you can make a photo that stands out of the most common subject. And leading to another one of my ditons, we call them in French, a saying, is that if you can't find uncommon subjects, take uncommon photos of the common ones. And that's my advice, because I get people who tell me, oh, there's nothing exotic where I live, and there's nothing to photograph or whatever. This red-winged blackbird is the most common species in North America, and you can take a great photo if, make the photo special. Now, I might as well run through what the winning conditions are to get the shot. Is basically you need a singing bird, which often is going to be in the spring in the northern hemisphere as they sing for mates. You need a sunlit subject, but background in the shade so that the bright breath shows up against it. And you need it to be cold within a couple of degrees of the freezing point. And you need zero wind, zero, like not 1 kilometer, not 1 knot of wind. So that's actually almost the hardest condition, is to get flat calm. So in the spring where I live here, if I look at the forecast and it says it's going to be calm, -2 degrees and sunny, I'll sometimes go out and get the shot. And it shows that you can make something unique out of the most common and available species.
You're absolutely right. And I think people become obsessed with photographing the exotic because that lends credibility to the photograph. But I think you'll find, especially where we are, there's so much you can take a photograph of. It's not just about the megafauna. And
100%.
It's looking for the shot. And we always say that as soon as you've got a camera in your hand, everything becomes interesting because now you can see the detail.
100%, 100%. I think the most skilled photographers will just find interesting things or interesting ways to capture things without going on an exotic trip anywhere. Even though I'm in the exotic trip and you're in the exotic trip business, you don't need to wait for your exotic trip to find great photographic opportunities.
Yeah. So get out there and practice. Get out there and practice. That's the trick. So Simon, I just want to touch again on the success you have on YouTube at the moment. I'm trying to figure out what is the magic dust. I can understand that you put a lot of work, a lot of research, understanding, but what would you say? What's the one thing that has helped you to stand out from the crowd and become the success you are today?
Yeah, I think the answer is that you can't boil it down to one thing. I started off with a video on how to get the red-winged blackbird breath shot. And I thought my channel would be about going out into the field and following me in the field. But interestingly enough, if I go back and look at my first 6 videos I've ever created, there are 3 behind the scenes, out in the field. I'll take you in the field, show you how I take my photos. And there are 3 more educational ones where I just teach people about photography principles. The 3 behind the scenes videos are averaging 40,000 views, and the 3 educational ones are averaging 400,000 views. So what became very clear to me is the market is much bigger for education versus behind the scenes. So now the behind the scenes videos, it's hard to do well with them. But what I do now is I go out to places like Kenya and shoot footage. And then I go back home and make an educational video on how to take a certain type of shot in Kenya, like shooting in low light. And I use my footage of my field trip as content as part of my educational video. But in terms of how have I been successful? Boy, it's still hard to put my finger on it because I broke a bunch of rules. Everyone said, don't have an introduction to your video. Don't spend any second saying my name is or anything like that because no one cares. But me, the first 40 seconds of my video, I start off with an engaging question. Hey, is this a problem for you? To try to get their attention. And then, I do like I mentioned earlier about the briefing note. Explain what the problem is, explain in detail how the problem works. And then when you explain the solution at the end, you say, of course, that's the solution. And then a good communication skill. I'm likable, apparently, and there's no way for me to characterize that. I know other YouTubers who are making similar content to me that aren't having success, unfortunately. And their content is, in my eyes, as good as mine. But somehow the likability factor is not translating as much because people say, Simo, you're that uncle I always wanted to teach me how to do something. So that comes across somehow, and it's a combination of good communication skill and a good teaching strategy as well. And then in my video editing, including a lot of visual content. I never speak for more than 5 or 10 seconds in my video without putting something else on the screen to kind of break up the monotony. So it's a combination of all those things.
I think I'd echo the statement that, you are likable and very relatable. I think people relate to you very easily. You've taken them on a journey, and there's a lot of humility in the way that you give this information. You're kind of like, I know it's difficult, but I've figured it out, and come with me on this journey, and I'm going to explain to you how to solve this. So
yeah,
kudos to you. Kudos to you.
Thanks. And the other thing is, I think I stand up for the little guy. I have no patience for photographic snobbiness. I've got a bigger camera, and, if you shoot with a phone, you're not a real photographer. I've got a video, the lives of real photographers. Real photographers do this. I have no patience for that at all. And I have no patience for gatekeeping all the secrets to yourself to keep other people out from getting into photography because you feel threatened. I have no patience for that. So I stand up for the little guy with the cheap camera, and I'll stand up for them all day long. And I'll never, ever turn up my nose to someone who's learning, asking, questions that don't make sense to the experienced photographer. Every once in a while, you're a YouTuber, people will say snide remarks about you in your videos every once in a while. And when they do, a whole bunch of people come to my defense. So people know now not to make negative comments about me on my videos, because they're going to take a beating from everyone else. So I think I've got a team of people that have felt good about the lack of snobby approach to photography that I bring as well.
You've built a community, and it's a community, and I think that's it. There's the more welcoming you are to be. You have to understand that everybody started photography at exactly the same place, and everyone is at different levels in their photographic journey. In anything, in any hobby, you can be put off really quickly when somebody makes you feel less than because you're at the beginning of your journey. So I think that's very important to be able to come across in your videos.
Yeah. And I finish every video with, I know you can do it. And you'd be surprised how many people mention that to me. And then they send me messages on Instagram, and I know you can do it. It's become, if I ever make a t-shirt or a hat and start making some merch, I know you can do it, will be my line.
Well, is the t-shirt going to have to say, I knew I could do it? Is that what's going to have to be the other way around?
Yeah, that's right. You'd be surprised the emails I get from people, especially people with mental health problems, PTSD, and so on, that write me these wonderful emails about how my teaching them photography has helped them take on a hobby and distract them from all the problems in their life, and have picked them up and got them out of the house that they were stuck in the house for years. And the other type of email I get is, hi, I'm 13 years old and I want to be like you when I grow up. I get them almost every day. And the quick advice there is to get good and get known. Those are kind of the two things. So proficiency is important, and you need to be able to have good quality work, and you need to get yourself out there. And social media is the easiest way by far these days to get known. And you don't need to get known all around the world. You can be the local hero first. For me, I started posting on Facebook and Instagram, and then next thing you know, the newspaper's calling and say, hey, can we write a story about you in that photo? And then the television station called and said, hey, can we do an interview online after the news? And then it goes from there. You start small, get known locally, and then just use every step to kind of grow your experience, your skill set. And of course, video is very popular these days. And I know that's a controversial thing to say, because a lot of photographers want to fight the trend for video, but TikTok and Instagram are video platforms as much as photography platforms. So having a few video clips of your wildlife and the photo, or a video clip of you taking the photo and the photo, or being brave enough to turn the camera on your face and talk to the camera, will get you a lot more attention than just posting photos on Instagram.
Simon, we're now on your fourth image. Tell me about this one.
These are white-fronted bee eaters in Kenya. And of course, I needed something African on my deserted island to remind me, but also a reminder that good skill can actually make the shot. So these bee eaters were flying, and the beautiful thing about bee eaters is that they often will leave a perch, go get something to eat, and come back to the same perch. So what I would do, me and my guides have developed the 3-2-1 system, which is basically when the bird leaves the perch, the photographer stays on the perch And when the bird starts flying back to the perch, the guide will count down 3, 2, 1, and then you start shooting right when the bird shows up. Also, it was at sunset, and I got the guide to move the vehicle so that I had the dark background against which the sun, the backlit wings would show up. And we did the 3, 2, 1 and got one of them. And I said to my guide, now all we need is 2 to land at the same time. And about a minute later, I got the 2 landing at the same time. And I'm at my heart, I'm a bird guy, and I started my wildlife photography with birds. So for me, seeing a bee eater and getting a photo of one was just as exciting as getting a leopard. And it was a reminder to me that you can science your way into an artistic photo rather than it just be luck and just art.
You've obviously been a passionate bird photographer for quite some time now. So are birds your go-to photographic subject?
I think birds they're accessible. I live on a major migration pathway, both spring and fall here in Nova Scotia. So we get lots of birds and we get great phenomena. Like, for example, within an hour or two's drive from home, there's a place where I can see flocks of tens of thousands of sandpipers coming back south from breeding grounds in the Arctic, and peregrine falcons diving after them, trying to get a lunch. And one of the things I like about birds is the great variety of them. They're pretty, and I think they're challenging. I've always gravitated to hard photography. I do astrophotography. I do deep space astrophotography with a telescope. Dreadfully hard. There's like 100 steps, and if you mess up step 32, the whole image is ruined and the night is ruined. But I enjoy the tough photography because I get that rewarding feeling that I've done something that's difficult, but still done it well.
For your fifth and final image, we asked you to choose one that was taken by another photographer. And you've chosen this one, which is a very dramatic image of 2 planes flying through a total solar eclipse by Peter McKinnon. So tell me, why did you choose this image?
Oh, this one. Well, being a guy who's interested in astrophotography, getting photos of eclipses and so on are right down my alley. And for this particular eclipse, I had a plan. A friend of mine and I, Gavin Hardcastle, who goes by Photo Tripper on YouTube, had a plan. We were going to get his spouse to stand up on the top of a hill in a sundress with an umbrella in the orb of the eclipse and get her photo right in the eclipse. The problem is the eclipse was 65 degrees elevation and 45 degrees was the tallest, the steepest hill we could find. So we couldn't get that shot. And I thought, darn, it's above 45 degrees. There's nothing that I can do. And then I saw Peter McKinnon's photo, who's a fellow Canadian, a fellow Canon ambassador as well. After he posted the photo, I posted something along the lines of, I couldn't get the shot I wanted because the eclipse was too high in the sky. I guess I wasn't thinking big enough. Basically, because I did start thinking, hey, can I get a tightrope walker and shoot a tightrope walker and stuff? And I never thought in a million years to think of putting a plane and 2 planes flying through the scene while I was taking a photo of it. So I love the photo. I love the execution. There's a great YouTube video about it as well. But also a reminder, it's the shot that, I need to think bigger. So the next eclipse is going to be Iceland and Portugal, I think in 2026. And my brain has started thinking now, and I'm thinking, go big, think of something really good, not just decent. So yeah, that is the shot that I wish I could have taken, because being an astro guy and a photographer at the same time really made me envious of that one. I did end up getting some shots of that eclipse. And interestingly enough, it was beautiful blue sky all afternoon. And then 10 minutes before, some hazy cloud came in, and I actually thought it was going to ruin my photo. And when I looked at the photos afterwards, underneath the haze during the total eclipse, there are these prominences that stick out around, and they're lighting up the haze in a beautiful pink glow. So I actually thought my photo was ruined, and it's probably made better by that.
I actually watched this video about how it was done, and it's nail-biting, edge-of-your-seat stuff to try and get something to align. Absolutely amazing. And here at Pangolin, we're big fans of Peter McKinnon. I think he, like you, has an amazing channel. everything he does is absolutely fascinating. So tell you what, Peter McKinnon, if you are watching this, here's an invitation. Why don't you come on safari with myself and Simon? Are you up for that one, Simon?
I'm 100%. Peter, let's make it happen.
Now, before I let you go, the premise of the talk is that you were working in a remote location. So I'm going to give you the opportunity to choose where that remote location would be. Where would you be spending eternity and why?
There's some places that I haven't been, that I can see myself wanting to go, like Antarctica, South Georgia, Falkland Islands, for example. But I'm not sure that's the place to hang out all year round. So I'd say something warm like Galapagos, I think would be nice, and lots of interesting things to see. And if I'm allowed to bring a camera on my excursion as well to photograph, I've spent a lot of time looking up at big things like galaxies, and maybe haven't looked down enough at the small things and small creatures. That would lead me maybe to do something that I haven't done enough of, really, is macro photography, and go from the very big to the very small.
Well, I'm looking forward to following your macro photography journey then, which I'm sure you'll get to it sooner or later. Finally, if people want to follow you, find out more about what you're doing, where can they go?
They can see me on Instagram at, if you search for my name, Simon D'Entremont, you'll find it. And on Facebook as Simon D'Entremont Nature Photography. Of course, you can find me on YouTube. And I've got a website that if you search for my name on a search engine, I'm sure you'll find it quite easily. And the other thing I've done in the last couple of years that I'm really proud of is I've launched a wildlife photography course, about over 5 hours of video content for people early to intermediate in their wildlife photography journey. And I'm working right now, I hope to finish in the next month or so, on a course for processing wildlife photos in Lightroom Classic.
And we'll leave some links in the description down below so you can find them straight away. Simon, thank you very much for your time. It's been an absolute joy and a pleasure spending time chatting with you today. And thank you for being our first guest on the Pangolin Podcast.
Thank you so much.
Well, there we go. The first Pangolin Podcast is done. We hope you've enjoyed it. Before you go, please don't forget to sign up to the Pangolin Photo Safari's Friday Focus newsletter. You can do that by heading over to pangolinphoto.com, or you can scan the QR code on your screen now. If you've enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe to the YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss the next one. And while you're there, please give us a thumbs up, leave a comment and write a review. Your feedback means a lot to us, and we're going to keep developing the format until we get it perfect. Personally, I look forward to seeing you on a Pangolin Photo Safari soon, and all that's left for me to do now is to say that the Pangolin Podcast was hosted by me, Toby German, and produced and edited by Bella Falk. Thank you.